Well, everybody, thanks for coming to the next in the Psycho-Mental Health series. This is number 5. Today's is going to be on necessity, inspiring neurogenesis. Today we're going to be working more on actually how to do things and apply like our skills than many of the other ones. Other ones were more on a lot of information. This one will be more on skills training, and also why. So today our agenda is we're going to do an activity, and then we're going to cover the neurobiological basics of why we're doing this, what activities stimulate neuroplasticity, and I'm going to show a brain study that shows one of the first times they really got a good measurement of neurons being generated in the brain, and then what activities can we do to generate our neurogenesis. So the first activity, so I put a bunch of puzzles out on the table, different activities. Anybody get a chance to play with some of the toys?
A sphere.
Tell me what you do with them, though.
Well, play with them. So you gotta have to solve the puzzles in some cases, or just play around with, like, so I have Mad Libs, coloring book if you want to just color, fidget spinner.
To be disassembled.
So you can use all of these to do different activities that could inspire your brain to try to do new things. Like fidget spinners, you could just spin them in your hand, or you can try to move them down your fingers to try to not get it to stop spinning at the same time. Doing something new, I've never done that before. So you're training your brain to do new things anytime you play or interact with any toy or any activity. Seems like I'm getting faster at this as I practice more.
You know what I do.
Why do I think that's a convenient conclusion for tonight's topic?
So, does that mean that we should have taken notes?
On how to take them apart?
Yes.
No, that's not really the point.
Well, but otherwise, then it's just trial and error.
Could be, unless you gain some skills from putting them in back and forth together. Yeah. So all of the wood ones, they're at different skill levels. So this one's the easiest. So it's only got 3 pieces, and they slip apart pretty easily.
Yeah.
And it's not too hard to get together and back. But the point of this one is, I mean, you can look at it as a challenge, but the real underlying reason why you challenge ourselves with anything is actually to inspire our brain to keep growing and keep challenging ourselves. Even though we're adults, we could assume, these are just for kids. These aren't worth doing anymore. However, studies have started to show as we get older, we should probably do this as much or more than children do. As they have more neuroplasticity. When they're young, they actually have tons of neurons ready to go. As we get older, we need to actually force ourselves, our brains, to think they need to grow more. So by doing puzzles that are difficult for us, it actually gets our brains to keep generating new neurons. And that's what we'll cover today. This is a fun way to possibly inspire ourselves to get new neurons. So, next one. So I'm going to cover neurobiological basics, first term, and I covered this in the last one as well, some of these. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to grow new neurons and evolve connections between neurons in response to life's experiences and brain damage. Neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons significantly increases from birth to 5 years old, and then it really significantly slows down after childhood, but it never stops. Up until 30, 40 years ago, most neuropsychologists thought and neurologists thought we don't generate any more neurons after we have after childhood. That is not true. Now we've come to find that there's several regions of the brain, but we haven't located them all. But the primary regions is the hippocampus and the olfactory bulbs. They still generate a lot of neurons. And the reason they will or they will not is based off of neurotrophins. So neurotrophins promote the growth and survival of neurons. And neurotrophins are released when neurons are actively receiving a signal from being engaged, present, practicing, repeating, and continuing exposure. The neurons need to have a signal that continuously fires because you're doing something. And then the neurotrophins get sent out, and neurotrophins are released because neurons are used, not because what you're doing is good or necessary. It just uses them because you're using them. The neurotrophins released because you're using them. Now, if you don't get a signal for neurotrophins and you're not actually using your neurons, your brain will enter into a neural pruning process where it'll actually prune back those neurons. Basically, it's a neurobiological cell death, thinking that there's no need to have that neuron. Basically, it's best to think of it as the most fittest neurons or the most used neurons are the ones that survive. So what activities can stimulate neuroplasticity? What we were just doing just a second ago, playing, but the most effective way is physical activity. Physical activity stimulates the release of BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. There are other neurotransmitters, that's one of the main ones. It sets in motion the growth of new synapses and connections. By actually doing exercise, your brain will just release the neurotrophins, and it will actually say, okay, it's time to make new neurons. It's not necessarily just running or walking. It's actually telling all the neurons potentially, let's try to make new connections. So that's more of a benefit than maybe previously assumed. So practicing and repeating positive activities, rehearsing activities. Does anybody have any ideas of what kind of stuff that they do, or do they have an example, something that they regularly practice, something that they do that might be good for them?
No, I told you about trying to learn how to learn to read music and to play an instrument.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's been challenging.
And you don't play a musical instrument right now?
I've never ever played an instrument or learned how to read music, so I'm learning all this at the same time now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea, actually. Feels like it's challenging, right?
What instrument?
Hammered dulcimer.
Oh, a hammered dulcimer. Oh, might still be fun.
Any other things that anybody practices or does regularly? Something that they've been challenging themselves with?
I figure out the stock market.
Is that challenging?
Can be pretty challenging.
Yeah, it's actually not acting like it usually would right now.
Well, exactly.
So that's
Yes.
probably really challenging.
Right.
Anybody else?
Learning new languages,
Oh yeah.
a good one.
Is it something you're doing right now?
Should be. I gave it up because it was hard to keep going
Oh, okay.
without using it.
You're trying to learn Spanish, right?
Yeah, I tried to learn Spanish for my trip and really enjoyed it, and I got pretty far, but I didn't use it, so it just disappears.
Mm,
So I'd like to get back and do it again.
yeah. That's kind of what I'm covering here today. Why does it disappear if you just practiced? just a little bit ago. Why does that disappear for you, and then some people it stays with them for a lifetime?
Yeah. The disuse, I just didn't use it.
Right.
And then the next time I went to use it, I thought, I have no idea how to say that.
Okay.
Probably, well, I mean, memory works differently, but like as far as like the neuroplasticity, it's probably like muscular atrophy. There's a metabolic cost associated with those cells, and if you're not using them, it doesn't make sense to keep them.
That's actually very accurately stated. That's your brain is continuously trying to kind of keep a balance. In particular, the neurotrophins versus I forgot the term, the one just a second ago. The neuropruning. It's a competition for energy consumption, and if they're not being used, the brain is basically trying to balance that out. It's thinking, why is this even here? It's using up energy. But language is actually the easiest to learn between the ages of 0 to 10 years old. That's when we have the most neuroplasticity or the most neurogenesis. And then the brain is pruned back extensively after that. 0 to 5 years old, and then it's pruned back, I think about 50% of all neuron potential is pruned back by 10 years old, if you don't use it.
When I was in school, they didn't start teaching a language until you were past that age.
Yeah, that's what's critical about this. Most of this information wasn't known until about 40 years ago. So a lot of the root way of teaching, the assumptions were you can pick it up between a certain age period, but that is actually not true. The best time is between 0 and 10 years old. So some other examples, engaging in mental training strategies like mindfulness and meditation. Being present, that's what that would create. We talked about that on our last meeting. Being in an enriched and stimulating environment, in particular doing something new. For some people, like we're in a new room today, so this is could be stimulating and enriching. It was setting it up. But for some people, being in a new country, for example, that would be very enriching and stimulating. But that would depend on how you perceive it. Because some people would be in a new country and everything's so new, but they have a perspective of this is scary, this is all new, I feel stressed out. That person almost definitely is not going to learn anything from being in that experience. I'll cover that a little bit later. There's a reason for that. Engaging in positive social interactions, like here. Developing a sense of purpose in life, that can really give you something to hold on to and to figure out, why I'm doing this and give some oomph behind it. The emotions in particular very much benefit your memory. If there's an emotion attached to it, positive or negative, it typically wires more significantly. Participating in novel activities, repeated activities, things that are just normal everyday things, is better than doing nothing at all. So if you do nothing at all, it literally is giving a signal to your neurons, all right, I don't need this anymore. And people will steadily have a degenerative effect. For example, I've given this example several times, but when people are working throughout their lives and when they retire, in a lot of the research we've come to find that people after they retire, their brain functioning drops very significantly afterwards. For the longest time, people were saying, oh, it's just old age. Now the correlations are pretty much directly tied to, and some actual brain measurement tests have found that it's actually due to inactivity. They're not doing what they were doing before, and they're not doing anything new. So the neurons are like basically, nope, nothing's needed here. So it basically makes a precipitous neuropruning process.
Reading books qualify as stimulating?
Yeah. Even if you read a book you read before, it would be either a novel activity or a brand new story. It actually gets the neurons that think they're necessary, either the ones you already have or you've never read that book before, it'll generate new pathways. So reading all this, is there any other activities that anybody can think of that they do that they feel like might be inspiring their brains to potentially generate new neurons?
I regularly play Magic the Gathering with very good friends.
It's said to be one of the most challenging games of all the games.
Yeah.
Apparently, most complex. That's right.
What game?
Magic the Gathering. It's like it's a role playing game.
What about sexuality?
What's that?
Sexuality. What about
Sexuality.
yes?
You mean like having sex?
Yes.
Oh, totally.
Physical activity.
That would be physical activity, but also depending on how you engage in it.
Yeah, that's true. It could be engaging in play.
Yeah.
There you go.
Like it probably would be anything you could think of up
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
But in particular, it's just doing something new or something stimulating in general. I guess it is kind of a rhetorical question when I ask it what anybody does. It literally could be anything. Just do something. But some activities will get more neuro generation than other things for sure.
Okay, let me ask about
Yeah.
watching TV.
I think that's a great example.
What, is that new, or is that the same old, same old?
Right. So I would say that's a great example of, I think they need to do more testing. Hypothetically speaking though, ask yourself if it's a novel activity, or are you actually doing something new? Are you watching a documentary? So it'd be hard to say that it's just universally bad or good, but the type of TV you watch, I think probably makes a big difference. Same way with any digital media. If it's something where you're just scrolling, every second and a half, you're going to the next page, you're probably not engaging the material. I would say, hypothetically speaking, that probably is not generating neuroplasticity. Except for maybe taking on new single pictures in your brain, maybe, and that might be something to think about, and we'll cover that in a little bit here. But I think that's a great question. Are you engaging your brain? And that might be the most important part of like whether it's neuroplastic or it's creating a sense of necessity to generate new neurons, or is it like your brain's like, I'm not doing anything, and then pruned. So here's a really good example of a study, one of the first studies where they definitely identified that there's definite neurogenesis going on in the brain. So what they did was they took a group of taxi drivers that have to learn all the roads and routes in London, which is a really large city. And to pass the test to become certified as a taxi driver in London, you have to actually memorize all the streets, which can take years. So what they found, it took about like 10 months on so just go through it. They tested people from the age of 32 to 62. So this is past the age of where they thought neurogeneration happens as children. That on average they were driving a taxi from 1.5 years to 42 years, and each one of them to pass their test needed either 10 months to 3.5 years of training, like either practicing, some of them would ride a bike around town, studying maps, to eventually be able to pass this test. And what they found was, comparing the people that had to take this test and learn how to drive taxi in London, and comparing to regular people or neurotypical comparatively, they found that they generated more neurons in the lower part of the hippocampus. It was actually enlarged in gray matter in that region, which actually is an area of the hippocampus that is good for spatial navigation and figuring out how to figure out where am I at. So apparently those people had a definitely larger section of the brain. So the lighter one, that is the taxi driver, and the darker one is the regular control group. And they definitely found that they had a larger area of gray matter in the lower posterior section of the hippocampus.
With GPS now, they don't need to memorize the streets anymore.
That being said, that actually might be a factor in people having less ability to navigate. Literally, our brains are not finding it necessary to try to navigate anymore.
Noticing that for myself.
So that actually could be an example of why we actually shouldn't be so much using Google Maps to, depending on digital media. The brain evolved to navigate without any of these digital devices. So it's expecting that kind of environment to learn in. So our technology has increased so much that we quite literally are getting well past what our brain actually evolutionally probably can handle. But that being said, this was an important study. They did this around 2000. Well, they did it over a couple years in 1998 or so. This study found very definitively we do generate new neurons, and in particular in your hippocampus. Throughout your life, it continuously changes the connections or generates new neurons, because that is your central processing for your brain. If you didn't have that, we wouldn't learn how to figure out how to walk in our house. If we walked into a new house or we changed our furniture around, we would keep tripping over stuff. But as we get older, even when we're older, we can literally learn, oh, I put the chair there, and walk around it. All that's figured out in the hippocampus and your memory. So, general question. This is what I want you guys. We have a Venn diagram. Some people find this very, very fun to do, but this is a great example of what do I like to do, and what causes neurons to grow and connect, and whichever there's overlap in the center, that's the activity you should do to create more neurons. So, like you were saying, watched TV, you'd say mindless TV. You might like to do that, but it might not be creating new good neuron connections. So that would be outside of the Venn diagram right here. So it'd be over in his section or something. So think of something that actually, something you like to do, and something that would grow connections more. Wrap your head around something.
Yeah, so it seems like that's breaking down into entertainment versus a cognitive process.
Mm-hmm.
So if I look at a TV program and the commercials, and I'm analyzing the commercials, I'm thinking about what are they trying to say, how are they doing it, what's the hook, and then the TV show I'm looking at and saying, okay, what's the point? So it seems like that could be cognitively analytical,
Mm-hmm.
versus if I'm just letting them roll through and almost just absorb subconsciously or something
Right.
like that. So there would be a difference there, I would think, right?
Totally.
Okay.
I think that's probably a good distinction to make, is that how you're engaging with the information makes a big difference. For example, say you, hopefully this never happens to anybody here, but I'm sure somebody can relate that might ever watch this, is say you were put in a prison and you're in solitary confinement. They don't allow you to have anything, no stimulation, you're literally away from the general population for a period of time. A person could get really bored down there, for sure. So if they don't engage and try to think of things that they could possibly do and think about in their own mind, yeah, that could get really boring for them. Whereas another person might be, well, I'm down here, I'm stuck here, I'm gonna think about maybe this philosophical argument I wanted to think about when I was a kid, I'm gonna think about it now and just like try to go around the different angles of it while I'm in solitary confinement. So that person is engaging that situation where you could arguably say there's almost no stimulation at all, but they're actually able to possibly generate neurons in that moment. So they're actively trying to engage in that. That's intent is probably the most important thing to think about.
Right, intent.
Yeah,
Yes.
same with TV. If somebody's just camping on the couch, not really paying attention to commercials or the program they're watching, yeah, it's probably safe to say what is being activated in the brain is maybe your memory for what you're watching, maybe, but maybe not even that. But you're definitely not engaging your critical thinking skills for sure. And that might be a big concern, I think. If it comes to what inspires you to generate new neurons or to be pruned back. So what if your brain starts to think, I don't need these critical thinking skills anymore. All I'm doing is watching TV all the time. Yeah, snip, snip. Maybe. That might be one way to look at it. If you, and part of what I'm doing and I'm presenting here, I'm trying to make the point of why this is necessary. I think a lot of people unfortunately assume once they learn something, they're good to go. But that's not how the brain works. And we're definitely coming to find that's not even close to how it works. If you find that you need to be constantly engaging in life to actually keep this brain working, and you knew that that is make or break depending on what you're doing, yeah, maybe you might be more engaged all the time. So what I want everybody to do is think of like an activity that you enjoy to do, that you think might also stimulate you to actually generate new neurons or get you like active and going in a new direction. I'll give you a little bit of time to think about it. So does anybody have an example of like an activity that they'd like to do and that might inspire them to create new neurons?
Like painting. I took a beginner watercolor course earlier in the year, so I'm gonna get back into that. It was fun. And I'm not an artist. I'm an accountant.
Yeah, so then it's challenging for you.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But it wasn't stressful for me. It was very playful. I went into it with the right mindset, saying I'm here as a beginner class. I'm not here to create art. I just want to learn technique, and I went with the flow. And there were so many people in that class that were huffing and puffing because they do art. You know, the majority of people are retired and do a lot of art, but they didn't do watercolor. So they went in with this preconceived notion that they could do it, and they were stressed that it didn't look the way they wanted to.
Right.
Me, I'm just like learning brush strokes, the complete basics.
I think you gave a really good example of trying to do something completely different and having an open mind for the experience. You were more present. We covered that, talked about it last session as well. That's how you're present. Either you're trying to repeat something you've done before, like they were, and that became frustrating, or you open to trying to learn something new. That probably creates a lot of neurons. Yeah. Did you gonna say something? Or
That suffering comes with expectation.
I was just gonna
Right.
say, yeah, they came in with expectations.
Right.
What I was thinking about was working with the public. It's challenging because everybody might bring a different challenge to you because it's a different personality with different demands of whatever the position is that you have working with the public. And some people like that because it's constantly new and it keeps you engaged because it's not boring and repetitive because every individual that you're serving in whatever way your job requires, whereas other people don't feel comfortable with that because they have expectations of this is the way my other clients act, and now you're acting differently. This is more of a challenge,
Right. I don't think the neuroscience is really, and maybe I'm not aware of it, but I don't think they've made a really good distinction between whether somebody's doing something that's something they've done before versus always challenging themselves. What's the ratio of neurogenesis for that? The one study I showed up there is a good example of a correlation where, okay, they definitely know those taxi drivers were driving in a really complex thing, and they saw that their neurons definitely generated more in that region. But what about people that just do the same thing over and over again? What about people that are painting but not painting something new? I think that would be a great exploration of like,
Yeah.
what's the difference there in neurogenesis.
Do you have details on the measurement of the neuron activity? Like what kind of instruments do you
For that experiment that was done, that they used an MRI, and they also they used two different methods of like calculating what they considered more active growth.
Okay.
And one of them was they're counting the number of pixels that lit up in the MRI, thinking that was definitely stimulation from doing the maps and whatnot. I think that there's a lot of stuff that needs to be perfected about how they measure that.
Yeah.
But for me, I think that looks good enough. They definitely found that there's a larger mass of like actual gray matter, which looks different than white matter apparently in the MRIs and different things. So.
So they have the assumption that more mass is better.
Yeah, for gray matter in particular, that is the open ends of the neurons that are actually communicating with each other. The more gray matter that there is, the more potential there is to make new connections there. White matter is the myelination of the axon from one neuron to the next. It makes for a really quick signal, but it also needs to be exact. It needs to be I am driving down the road and I'm controlling this arm and set a steady signal down the myelinated sheath all the way to my hands that controls and up to the brain to keep me on straight. Gray matter is actually seeing a problem and something you've never seen before and trying to figure it out. Your brain is going to actively try to sort out and figure out, does it work this way? No. Does it work this way? And just process it. So that's the difference between gray and white matter. White matter is good, fast process, but gray matter is actually your potential to figure out new things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the last 5 months I've been going to dulcimer rehearsals, trying to teach myself music and how to play it, and I was just getting myself stressed out, so I finally took a lesson today. So I felt like I was sort of copping out, but I needed that extra help. So.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at that. I think that especially when we're trying to get ourselves to do new things, don't be afraid to try different ways, and especially asking for help. Like it may get you over that next step that you didn't think or you can't currently see.
Yeah.
Because we've learned a certain way of doing things. Everything from, especially psychology and counseling, for example. The reason you go to see counseling is everybody knows the brain, but we've got blind spots. We don't know everything. We can't see everything. So getting a counselor to kind of look over the way you perceive, they might actually show you a different door to walk through. So I think that's true for anything. Definitely don't be afraid to ask questions. That's super helpful. And it's part of that, one part of the social engagement. Could you turn it back one? Engaging in positive social interactions, because that gives you the opportunity to engage with different people and ideas and see things from a different angle.
I'm hoping the lesson will give me confidence to continue, trying to learn more.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that regard, what I have found, again in teaching, is, and you mentioned your art class. So often, people who are totally unschooled in something, like if you just decided you were going to teach yourself art, some things you would do intuitively. and they may be horrendously counterproductive. And that's why often, because, again, most things we've done, humans have been doing for hundreds of thousands of years, and some humans have kind of figured things out. And so we can kind of bypass those errors and get more productive. And I think that's what I was kind of getting at.
Well, that's an interesting point too, because that's actually another way to challenge you on that. Because there's one more, you can look at a problem as being just one solution, but there is almost always multiple solutions to almost any problem. Now there's two symbols missing right here. Can anybody solve that problem? 1 + 1 symbol number equals 12. Anybody solve that problem?
Yeah,
Plus -10.
that would be 11.
Any
So
solutions?
the oh.
Like a possible
1 + 1 × 6?
times 6, would that equal it?
Mm-hmm.
But there's
Times
gotta be more than one.
I mean, with the,
Plus
with
10.
the,
Example.
plus 10 works?
There you go.
Yeah. Any other solutions to that?
Oh, okay. I see what you want. But if
Divided by
you do
24.
the times 6, you have to put parentheses in 1 + 1.
yeah, that's what yeah.
Otherwise, it's not gonna work.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1 + 1 is what has to be multiplied by 6.
There's
With parenthetically.
minus 14.
They'll make it -1. But yeah, we
Yep,
understand.
Good point,
Yeah.
good point. My point on this is, I guess you'd probably put a parentheses around this.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
got negative, and there's that.
Yeah, there you go.
So we're doing basic math today as well, but my point on this is, depending on how you look at any problem, there could be one solution for sure that will give you an answer. However, sometimes, and probably almost always, there are multiple answers to a question.
Right, what was, last week at the regular Harrisburg meeting, talked about that F. Scott Fitzgerald quote and integrative intelligence.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same thing where being able to process multiple perspectives at the same time,
Mhm.
you will see something that you wouldn't have seen if you just stuck with the thing that initially made sense to you, that you, like the easiest thing to process.
Right. And that being said, I would argue, especially when it comes to neuroplasticity, is to not get stuck in the idea that there is only one solution or a most effective solution every time. When it comes to neurons, that's probably not the right way to look at it. Neurons do not know fact, fiction, right, wrong, good for you, bad for you. Everything that you can learn can be a good habit or a bad habit. Something that is incredibly intelligent to one of the most ridiculous conclusions you could have ever done, or a fun conclusion that makes everybody happy and everybody might be entertained by that solution. So the more neuroplastic idea is to be able to think of multiple ideas and solutions, like what you're talking about. That's probably better neuroplastic wise than to only have one solution and think there's no other solution. Because then maybe you're always using that same neuron path and never challenging it to try, oh, actually there's this critical thinking skill here that would have been stimulated if you try painting in a different kind of way. And actually accept the fact that I'm gonna have to learn a new skill. Because some of those people, they were actually possibly not being open to learn that new way of learning. So,
Like, for example, religious people like Christian.
you say Christians?
Like, for example, what kind of neuroplasticity is there for one that only thinks that the Bible is the absolute truth?
Exactly. I would argue that's potentially stunning neuroplastic growth. Because I've been using this chart regularly. I like to use it because it kind of frames stuff a bit. But even when we're talking about neuroplasticity, your biology is the neuroplasticity, and we're always evolving towards a certain kind of ability to interpret things in our environment. So that takes our cognition and what we've learned from our environment. When it comes to somebody that really sticks to like a culture, a religion, maybe even worse, what somebody else says is true, they might have a certain kind of framing, and it's the only way they think, or maybe if we can even consider it thinking. They may not develop a lot of their critical thinking skills and their cognition. Instead, they're always thinking, what does that authority figure say? What does God say? And they're always stuck with like a little answer here that may not be a good answer for everything.
Particularly when that environment provides security.
Right, right.
Psychological security.
It might feel good. Yep. There might be a lot of benefits they get from it.
And then if the security is threatened, it starts wars.
Potentially, yeah. Which is a very binary way of thinking. It's like there's only one way, or else no way. Or you could work on your cognition and try to figure out like critical thinking skills of like, is there multiple different ways to look at this situation? Could my culture or my religion be right about this, this, and this? But there's some other things that maybe they're not so good about, and maybe I should figure out a different kind of way. That would be a more complex way of thinking. I would think that that's maybe an example of what you're getting at. That's where somebody is there's an efficient way of thinking. This is covering all my bases: existential, security, community, but maybe it doesn't supply a lot of other answers for them that maybe they might need. So I would definitely challenge everybody to try to expand their mind in that regard, especially in that sense. The most important point about this to come away from is the neuroplasticity is a ongoing thing that is working in the brain to try to fill in the spaces. It's trying to generate new neurons if they're needed, or prune them back if they find that they're not needed. Use it or lose it. If you want to try to inspire your brain to create new neurons, there are a lot of different techniques, a lot of different activities that you can do that can create new neurons and inspire your brain to form new ideas. Right now, we might debate about whether like being an atheist or humanist might create more gray matter. I think it's a good question, but if you're just asking the question but not doing things that actually creates that brain matter, I think that's probably the better point. We should be focusing on ourselves, maybe helping other people try to become better people as well.